Unlock the power of your mind. This is Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. This is an hour dedicated to understanding a little more about ourselves, our beliefs, and how we approach enlightenment. Indeed, an hour devoted to learning something more, not just about the world we live in, but about how, what, and why we think as we do. An hour for the open-minded, willing to challenge some of those old ideas behind who we are and who we might just become. I'm Eldon Taylor, and this is Provocative Enlightenment. All right, last week our show was about shamanism. Our guest was Peter Calhoun, and he shared his own transformation from Episcopal priest to shaman. Michelle wrote, "Thank you for another amazing show." Kevin remarked, "Love Peter, excellent, sincere guest," and Eldon did ask the tough questions, and he answered them confidently and clearly. Nancy added, "I hope you have Peter on again. It was too short." Richard wrote, "I love the show. I consistently have the same question over and over. How do you know who and what to trust? A zillion people with visions and spiritual journeys, all with different stories." Kimberly wrote, "Love the show today, Eldon. Going to read Peter's book, Soul on Fire and Life Without Limits." Carrie wrote, "I enjoy your show and thank you for the opportunity of the free downloads." Now, Carrie is referring to the free InnerTalk MP3 programs we make available at InnerTalk.com. These are the real deal, the patent and proven InnerTalk technology, and they're there for you as a part of our own Pay It Forward efforts. Just go to InnerTalk, INNERTALK, InnerTalk.com, and choose free programs from the left-hand navigation pane. There are several titles there waiting to facilitate your personal growth journey. William wrote, "We have found your products very helpful and effective." Ren wrote, "I attended your conference in Washington, D.C. I greatly appreciate both the information that you shared and the manner in which you delivered it. Your lecture was both entertaining and informative. Switching to your lecture was one of the better decisions I have made. As soon as I finish reading, I believe I'll start on mind programming. I also intend to tune into your radio show as often as my schedule permits and share your website and information with my friends. Thanks again for sharing this vitally important information." Well, thank you, Ren, for your feedback and for the pictures you emailed. I'll use your letter to remind everyone out there that if you missed D.C., please join me in Pasadena in October. The details are all at hayhouse.com. Many of your favorite authors will be at the I Can Do It conference in Pasadena, so plan to attend if you can. All right, that's all the time we're going to take for letters today, but I do invite you to opine by sending your email to eldon@eldontaylor.com or by joining me on Facebook. We can't get all of your letters on the air, but they do impact our programming. And once again, I thank you for your feedback and continued support. Now to today's show, an exciting show in my view, Killshot with Major Ed James. What is Killshot? I was riveted as I watched the film titled Killshot. During the top-secret remote viewing CIA and U.S. Army research program, trained viewers that were normally tasked with foreseeing the outcome of war-related events began picking up on a future occurrence. At first, these viewers, along with Major Ed James, today's guest, the program's senior operations and training officer, had thought their subconscious was projecting their fears. Well, it turns out that's not quite how it is. One of the more famous people to have worked on remote viewing is Ingo Swann. To the critics of remote viewing, Swann offers this, quote, "It is interesting indeed why in our scientific times there should be a pogrom." Now, a pogrom is defined as an organized massacre of helpless people, such as, what took place during the witch hunts and how the sensitives were persecuted during the Inquisitions of the Middle Ages. So let's go back now. As Swann said, scientific times there should be a pogrom that victimizes our species' superpowers of biomind with its marvelous spectrum of sentiency. It may be that someone somewhere doesn't want that marvelous spectrum to be identified and developed. Close quote. We'll ask our guest today about his opinion with regard to so-called skeptics who might argue that it's all smoke and mirrors, tricks and chicanery. our guest today certainly would know. Major Ed Dames is the world's foremost teacher of remote viewing, the ability to perceive people, places, and events without using physical senses or special equipment. In the late 1980s, he served as training and operations officer for the Defense Intelligence Agency's controversial Psychic Intelligence Unit and is currently executive director of the Matrix Intelligence Agency, a private consulting group. Dames was a technical consultant on the Tom Cruise-produced feature film Suspect Zero, where he coached Sir Ben Kingsley and played the role of an FBI remote viewing instructor. His sci-fi experiences were the inspiration behind George Clooney's hit movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats. Major Edward A. Dames, United States Army retired, as a thrice decorated military intelligence officer and an original member of the U.S. Army prototype remote viewing training program. He served as both training and operations officer for the U.S. government's top-secret psychic espionage unit. So let's get the man himself in here. Welcome to Provocative Enlightenment, Major Ed Dames.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you join us, sir. I've been looking forward to this show. I've known of you and your work for some time. Ingo Swann cited some of my work in his book, The Nostradamus Factor. You were originally trained by Swann to produce psychically derived data. Swann was under the direction of Dr. Harold Pudoff, head of the remote viewing laboratory at Stanford Research Institute at the time. Please flesh this story out and tell us all about it, particularly what it was like for you, a military intelligence officer, entering into this arena to be trained as a remote viewer.
It was very difficult at first. I was what was called in my business a water walker. I was at the top of my trade as a military intelligence officer, the Office of Secretary of Defense, up there at cosmic levels of intel. And my mindset was a typical military officer, who cares about the frigging whales and the civilians and all that kind of thing. So I was not very spiritual, what we would say now would be spiritually oriented. So it was a big shock for me to find out that I had something called an unconscious that I could not control because I was a control freak, and it was more than a revelation to me to find out that I had something inside of me that was greater than my physical body, as some people would say. And the training was difficult for me. I had to confront my ego, I had to confront my analytical mind, and then I had to drop those, and that was a tough road to hoe.
But you were also very successful at it. And I think that's one of the things when I read the stories that have to do with how skeptics approach remote viewing, I'm constantly reminded of the many times you have been accurate with various viewings that you have made public, say as on Coast to Coast, and I want to get to that before we get through this show. But, how does the human mind, now, and I'm calling on your left brain as well as your experience at this point, how does the human mind process information in such a way as to facilitate remote viewing?
Well, first, a syntax and grammar had to be discovered for how the unconscious part of our mind communicates accurately to consciousness. And that was the problem in the laboratory. That was never discovered until the remote viewing laboratory at Stanford Research Institute, and until they put together this this sheet music for how that communication is effective. Once that template was established, this syntax and grammar, then the ball began to roll. Then we could understand by studying people like Ingo Swann, the best natural psychics in the West, because this was during the Cold War, so we didn't use the Czechs or the Russians. We studied their cognitive behavior. What were they doing when they were on target? When a natural psychic was accurately describing something at a distance. What was going on cognitively in their mind? And we modeled this behavior, and then we turned that into something like sheet music that we just follow now as a standard procedure. So if we're looking at something like someone's lost dog or stolen nuclear weapon, it's all the same procedure. It all follows the standard trainable procedure, so that you and I and anyone can do this if we have, by dint of our labor and our desires, if we want to learn how to do it.
You actually teach remote viewing, and I'm going to ask you at some point. So let's just flesh that out now. If our audience is interested in learning to pursue remote viewing or learning more about it, how would they do that?
Well, there's two methods. One, I produced a series of DVDs that teach this, and that's how most of my students learn it. And I have a forum at learnrv.com. That's all free, and very many advanced students are in there to help me as well. Or I have occasional workshops. My next one is in Reno, Nevada, in November. But the majority of my students learn via the DVD course.
Okay. You give me that website again.
LearnRV.com.
LearnRV.com. Okay. And your movie is, let's get that done, and then we'll attend to our business and then go back to our conversation, thekillshot.com, right?
Well, that is a separate entity. And, I mean, remote viewers, over the years, my team has produced a lot of information. We told the Japanese in 2004 about Fukushima that would happen, all those kinds of things that we were trying to save human lives. We forecast in 2004, for instance, that there would be about 1 million people that would suffer cancer and die as a result of Fukushima. But the Killshot is a separate entity because it is not that Fukushima is not of global. It's not a global disaster, because it is, but the Killshot is something else. It's what we foresaw as a discontinuity in human evolution, cultural evolution.
And I want to get to that, but what I meant is your website, thekillshot.com, is where people could go get the movie, right?
Yes, that's downloadable there.
Okay, cool. Now, let's. I want to get to all of this, but there is so much that I want as just the ground rules, so that we're communicating and we know that. How does a remote viewing? What is? Let me say it this way. What is the remote viewing process that you actually go through? How would it differ, say, then from psychic prediction or astral projection?
Or altered states, because we used altered states before the advent of remote viewing. In the military, we used altered states as well. Remote viewing is essentially systematic extrasensory perception. We turn our innate ability to be intuitive or psychic into a skill, period. And the way we do that is via this discovery of how unconscious communicates to conscious awareness accurately. In order to do this, we have a model. We don't have a theory yet. The scientific method requires replicability as well as a theory. We have replicability, but we don't have that theory. We're going to leave that to the academicians and scientists to come up with. We have a model for how we work. The model is that everything in the universe exists as a pattern of information. If I want to remote view you, for instance, it would let's say last night at some juncture, it would require about 45 minutes of my time to put together a diagram and a description of where you were and what you were doing last night. But you could not stop me from doing that for two reasons. One, I'm remote viewing you, I'm perceiving you in the past, and two, there's no energetic connection between me and you. It's not telepathy. There's no energetic connection at all. I'm essentially turning my attention, because this is an attention management skill, to the way you exist as a pattern of information in some place we call the Matrix. Before the movie The Matrix, the line producers in Hollywood took that term from my broadcast, The Matrix. In fact, I trained Carrie Ann Moss and other people in I have a lot of students who are very prominent world-class physicians and actors because they're interested in this. But you cannot understand this until you're trained. There is no common denominator for what we do and how we do it out there. If, for instance, I were to teach you how to skate, I skate. I could begin a lecture by saying, well, it's like skiing. You put these things on your feet, and there's a slippery surface, and blah, blah, blah. But in terms of remote viewing and what we do, there is no way to describe how we work without training you. And when I was trained, I was in awe. You asked, why I stuck with this and all that. What changed me? I was in awe of what this thing called an unconscious could do when it was structured and disciplined like we are. And so that's kind of beating around the bush, but what we do is we take and we target, just like a Google search. We use very specific search terms, for instance, Eldon Taylor now, or Eldon Taylor's great-grandfather on his mother's side's birthplace, if we're interested in that. And then we turn that into a structured search term. So we're not going anywhere. It's not an out-of-body experience. We're essentially, in terms of, you think of a holographic universe, that model, we're turning our attention to Eldon Taylor's great-grandfather on his mother's side's birthplace. We want to describe that birthplace. You probably don't know about it. But we can, as remote viewers, download all that information and go there, or tell you, where she was born and walk you to that site.
So the discipline, if I understand you correctly, basically is tuning in to information that's already within,
correct,
or exists within this matrix,
correct,
this holograph, and that's what you're bringing back. Now, you often bring it back as pictures, I understand.
Sketches and descriptions.
Okay.
Because many times for instance, let's say we're looking at an enigma of whether it's a UFO or any enigma, or let's say the Chinese have developed a secret weapon, and we're describing this weapon. Well, it may not have a name even to the Chinese. It may have a code name, so we're not interested in naming something. We're interested in accurately describing it, its size, its shapes, its colors, its smells, its sounds, what it does, its functions, the tangible and intangible ideas associated with it, and what its purpose and function is. That's what our stock and trade is.
All right. Now, I think the practical applications of remote viewing are pretty obvious, especially when it comes to espionage. But with that said, with the success that you had at SRA, why did the government abandon the remote viewing research? Oh,
it was a white elephant, a hot potato. It was passed from agency to agency because there's having been in many black, deep, dark units in my career, sometimes those can be a liability to the powers that be. For instance, let me give you a direct example. For many black units, for many hot potato units, hip pocket organizations in the government, the President of the United States, the POTUS, is not briefed because the President needs to maintain plausible denial if something goes wrong that's associated with these units. The Vice President is briefed, and obviously the Chiefs of Staff and the Secretaries of various services are briefed. But the President sometimes is not briefed because if something goes wrong, like, for instance, the psychic unit, it eventuates in some problem somewhere, the President needs to be able to say, I know nothing about it. So that's one aspect. The other is our particular unit, the Psi Spy unit, of which I was the operations and training officer, we were viewed by some generals as being associated with the occult and the deep dark, that side of perceived reality. So that's why we were compartmented. And when somebody inherited us, let's say some 4-star general at the Defense Intelligence Agency found out that they now possessed a unit, the psychic intelligence unit, they wanted to get rid of it because their political future may have been on the line if senators found out, and the Senate Intel Committee, which we briefed, found out that they were associated with something like this. So it was a real bugbear.
The development of our own use of remote viewing by way of intelligence agency, as I understand, was as a result of keeping up with what we believe the Soviets were doing.
Yeah, the 10 feet tall syndrome, we called it.
Yeah. Do you? I have friends that have visited the Soviet Union, and in fact, Karl Schleicher is absolutely convinced that they were indeed successful at using remote viewing. Do you have any information on that you can address?
Oh, yes. Yes, at the end of the Cold War. By the way, I live in Lugansk on the Russian border now, and my fiance is there. I've been there for 5 years. Mm-hmm. So I used to spy on various cities and use agents on the ground and other esoteric tools. And now, I'm sleeping with the enemy, essentially. At the end of the Cold War, I met my counterpart. You can read about this in my autobiography that's out and about. I met Ivan Sokolov, who was the civilian operations officer for the KGB's extrasense. That's the Russian word for what we do, extrasense team. They were natural psychics. The Russians never learned how to train this. The GRU, the Russian military intelligence, tried to use drugs to induce altered states, but that doesn't work for reasons that, if you're interested, I can explain. And the KGB, what they did was round up after I think they interviewed about 1 million Muscovites and other Russians, found the best natural psychics and used them to gather intelligence against the U.S. predominantly. There, I met my counterpart after the Cold War was over, Ivan Sokolov, and one of his deputies, and I helped him establish a civilian company like I had as well. Yeah, they actually did try to stop the hearts of rabbits and all those kinds of things unsuccessfully, but they were very, very successful in remote viewing, very successful indeed. And interesting, anecdotally, during the U.S. Spy Unit days, the U.S. Secret Service knocked on my door and said, "Look, we saw this publication that you published. In the intelligence community, there's a lot of publications that are secret, and this one had to deal with psychic advances in Eastern Europe, erstwhile Soviet Union." Mm-hmm. And they said, "Is President Reagan a danger here? We see the Russians are trying to stop the hearts of rabbits and all this. Is the president in danger?" And essentially I said, "No, he's not. But the Russians can read his mind essentially and know everything he's thinking about." And at which point these two Secret Service guys said, "Okay, thanks, we're out of here," because their job was to protect the physical security of the President of the United States. They could care less about anything else.
Right. Let's pick this up when we come back. We've got a hard break coming up. Now, the book, your autobiography, that's Tell Me What You See, Remote Viewing Cases. Is that the book?
Roger, it is.
Yeah, it's a great book, great book. It's at Amazon for all of you out there. You're listening to Provocative Enlightenment on HayHouseRadio.com, radio that goes anywhere and everywhere. Our guest today is Major Ed Dames, and we're discussing his work, his film Killshot, his books, the whole area of remote viewing. Check out his website. If you're not already in our chat room, this is a great time to join in the conversation. Just go to eldontaylor.com/chat. Stay tuned for these words from our friends.
Confusion, deception, manipulation, feeling a bit controlled, lost. Learn how you can take back control of your life through proven techniques in Eldon Taylor's revised edition of Choices and Illusions. This New York Times bestseller is a guidebook to your journey to self-actualization, filled with practical, real-life solutions backed by scientific studies and guaranteed to awaken your inner genie. Get your copy today from all books.
Have you talked to yourself lately? What does that inner voice say? Are you constantly hearing negative feedback? Ready for a change? Inner Talk, Eldon Taylor's patented subliminal technology, can do just that. Change your inner self-talk. Turn off the negative by replacing it with positive affirmations. Inner talk has been researched at universities such as Stanford and by governments around the world, and has been proven effective at priming your self-talk. Armed with a new positive outlook, you'll find everything becomes easier, from losing weight to stop smoking, giving presentations to riding horses. Learn new things to being a powerful salesperson. Choose your title for change today. Visit www.innertalk.com. That's INNERTALK.com. Innertalk.com.
Unlock the power of your mind. This is Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor.
And welcome back. If you just joined us, we're speaking with Major Ed Dames. And we're talking about his work in remote viewing, a marvelous film, Killshot, which we're going to get to here in just a minute. His website, learnrv.com. If you're interested in learning remote viewing, this is the preeminent man, the preeminent method, the preeminent school. I'd urge you to take a look at his website, learnrv.com. I want to remind you, though, before we get back to the show, to join me on Facebook as a friend or a fan. You'll always know where we are and what's on next when you do. Plus, many of the announcements only happen on my Facebook pages and or in my newsletter. So if you're not receiving your free copy of my newsletter, be sure to sign up for it when you visit my website. All right. Now, before the break, Major Dames, I had asked you essentially why our government had abandoned this and whether or not the Soviets had been successful. And you gave us a pretty good picture of that. Remote viewing, now I want to go right to this notion that the government has abandoned it, and yet because of a lot of what the viewing, or the results, I suppose I should say, other remote viewers were, I understand there's a number of modern-day Noah's Arks, and in many countries. Tell us what that is, a modern-day Noah's Ark, and why these facilities exist.
I'm not sure I comprehend what you're saying, Eldon.
Well,
vis-a-vis the subject at hand.
Okay, well let me come back and let's redress it this way. The Killshot. In your film, The Killshot, we have a major solar flare rolling at the Earth.
A series of very serious solar flares that essentially turn the Earth into a rotisserie.
Right. And if I understand correctly, acting in reliance on the information that a number of remote viewers, where you've all seen this same future rolling at us, a number of governments have created sanctuaries.
Actually, specifically, the one that is most prominent is the country of Norway has created a seed vault, and very, very perspicacious of them to protect the seeds, original seeds, not genetically modified seeds. So that would be, I think, would fit some part of what you're saying.
So the whole idea of this modern-day Noah's Ark, if we just go to that, how many other countries do you believe have positioned themselves anticipating an event of this nature?
Only Norway and the U.S. And in the U.S., it's a very secretive operation, actually, and parts of which I cannot talk about. Deals with the continuity of government, deep underground bunkers and things like that that were originally perceived to be fallout shelters from a nuclear war, but now governments realize that the sun is about to go on a rampage, and it will take down all modernity. We're so reliant on electronics, satellites, and all that will go away. And in order to wait out that storm, people that have a lot of money and power have built shelters for themselves.
Okay, so now I just want to make sure that we have this clear. The Killshot itself is this series of solar flares.
Very, very powerful solar flares.
Well, flesh that out for us. Tell us what you saw, what it is that you expect, what it is that your film.
Originally, when we were taking a look as a military unit over the horizon, so to speak, the time horizon, we were running into what I called a discontinuity in terms of human evolution, a cultural evolution, where even all the war, for instance, all the warring parties, and there are many wars all the time, unfortunately. The soldiers look up in the sky literally, and then go home, and then everything stops. And we in terms of movement of troops and armies and these kinds of things, because that's what we were focused on. Obviously, that's what your tax dollars paid us to do. And my thought was, okay, what's going on here? What's stopping life on Earth as we know it? And so we turn our attention to the cause of all these soldiers going home, because their priorities were eclipsed by something else. What was that something else? Well, make a long story short, it was our own star going on a rampage, producing very powerful solar flares over periods of time. And as you know, this is solar. I think this is solar cycle 24, and we feel that in 2013 that this is going down. This event is going down. The sun will produce a series of very powerful solar flares that will take down all of the satellites, many of Earth's power grids, for technical reasons that people can look up on the internet. And there will be Mad Max scenarios in a lot of developed countries. Now, the underdeveloped countries, they really won't, other than the desiccation and the loss of water and lives lost because of that, they won't realize too much of a difference. It's only the developed countries that are dependent upon electronics and telecommunications that are really going to notice a big difference. But this Mad Max scenario is realized as a result of the sun affecting electronics and the loss of water, because the Earth's atmosphere will heat up over time, and a lot of water sources will be gone. So my team and I spend a lot of our time concentrating on where the zones will be, the survival zones, where there will be fresh water, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and tell us, share with us what you found. My understanding is it's not too awful favorable for some areas on the globe.
The southern hemisphere is really going to suffer a lot of damage. We're not sure technically. We have ideas and hypotheses about why the southern hemisphere will be affected so greatly, but there are very few survival zones in the Earth's southern hemisphere. Very few. In the northern hemisphere, there are a lot of survival zones, but not in places like for other than geophysical reasons, not in places like China, because the population density is so great in places like China and other places in Asia that even though the solar flares may not essentially affect those areas as much, it will still take down a lot of our infrastructures, and the Mad Max scenario will reign, and therefore it's difficult to survive because your fellow man is going to kill you and eat you and rape your wives and children, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of elements that go into the survival type of thing, and that's why remote viewing as direct knowledge is so powerful and so useful, because it can point out exactly, personally, where you should go to wait out the storm. And
is that why you live in Russia now? Or so close to Russia?
No, that's not why. And my sanctuary...
But that is one of the areas where there's a great deal of natural sanctuary, isn't it?
No, I live there only because my fiancé lives there. We have a sanctuary in another place, in another area too. But we have to be able to get there in order to survive. So you have to act upon knowledge. Knowledge should be protected by wisdom, and should be shared. But you have to act upon it. So if we don't act on that, we're going to fry too.
Now, 2013, that's the first time I've heard that date. I've heard that you for all intent and purposes, didn't want to put a date on it because you really can't see in time, but you followed episodic events, and there were certain events that would take place in the world, and some of these events you forecast. I mean, you on Coast to Coast talked about the shot across the bow. That would be a preceding event to this major event. I believe, why is it that you've now settled on 2013?
It's an analytical conclusion based upon all of my team's work. That's all. And yes, it's true. We cannot. Mind is outside of time, so we have to be very careful. We have to append our search terms with what we call temporal qualifiers: past, now, present, near term, those kinds of things. Because if I just remote view Eldon Taylor, then my mind can pick you up as a neotenate at any point in your life, and so we have to dictate to unconscious where we want to pick up Eldon Taylor now, right, in the future, those kinds of things. But in the case of the Killshot sequence, these massive solar flares, we spent so much time on this, researching the nearest preceding recognizable events, those kinds of things, that we're now I am not certain, but convinced enough to move to protect my family that these events will occur in 2013.
Okay, now, if I understand the sequence right, we're going to see prior to this activity in North Korea that is nuclear in nature. Is that correct?
Correct. We about 25 years ago, maybe 22 years ago, we looked at the next use of a nuclear weapon in anger, where there would be a massive loss of casualties. So that kind of a search term, we have technical ways of setting this up. And that event that popped out of that research was a nuclear blast on the Korean Peninsula with a North Korean weapon. We don't know if it's a ground blast now or the nature of the weapon itself. We don't think it's a missile weapon. We think that it's something else. But that
like a mine?
Yeah,
designed
like a mine,
to
like something like a mine. That
okay.
It's an interesting scenario. It looks like a battle will begin on the Korean Peninsula. U.S. and South Korean troops will be drawn into the North, and then the North will pop this as a surprise. That's the kind of thing where we perceive the way this will go down. But the use of that weapon will really be the advent, the largest recognizable event prior to this solar kill shot sequence. That's what we put together, and so we feel we're right on the heels of that. We're in the breach.
All right, so we're looking at a very narrow time frame here, and of course, what pops into my mind when you squeeze the window down is all the prophecies that have to do with the Mayan calendar and December 21st of 2012. And I have to, I admit to being one of those that has boo-hooed that and basically said, look, the Gregorian calendar ends every year and we don't have some major apocalyptic or eschatological event. Do you see this as corresponding, these solar flares corresponding to this positioning, the changing of the planets, etc.?
Negative. No relationship whatsoever. In fact, it's like Y2K. I was on national radio many times years ago, and I was asked over and over again, what about Y2K? What about Y2K? And I said, look, we're not picking up anything about Y2K. There's no change. There's nothing happening at all. And it's the same thing with the Mayan calendar. It's inconsequential in terms of what I'm stating about the sun. It just isn't, I believe, there's no connection whatsoever.
Okay, now let me ask this. I mean, I relate to you when you say you were very left brain and we'll call it aspiritual. But you now have become a spiritual person. And I guess there's this tendency to want to hope that perhaps something could be done to change this. And I know that you would have looked at that. So I'm just going to bottom line, Major. Is there anything that can be done to change this forecast, this outcome?
There's things that could be done by other entities and other agencies that are not necessarily material or terrestrial based. But I'm a firm believer in the power of prayer, and I believe in angels and miracles. Absolutely, I'm an adamant believer. But I don't. My guess is that I don't think that mankind at this juncture, our juncture in time, has reached the threshold where enough people are coherent enough between their hearts and their minds to change what's going to happen. I think that we haven't evolved far enough to do that. So I'm not hopeful in that regard.
Well, of course, that's not the answer that we want to hear. So what we do want to hear at this juncture, then, let's assume you're correct. You have this right. Let's assume that despite the best efforts of many, and we'll all insist on bringing our best efforts to it, that we're unable to stop the occurrence as you see it. What should we do to best protect ourselves, our families? How should we respond? How are you responding?
Well, it has to be done at an individual level. For instance, as remote viewers, if we can remote view a future event, it already exists in time. Otherwise, we would not be able to describe it. It already exists in time. The heck with all this parallel universes and alternate reality. No, this stuff's going down. That's why we're describing. But as an individual, you can choose whether or not to participate in that event or act upon the information. Practically speaking, we have to, except for some cases which I'll elaborate upon momentarily, you've got to be out of the cities. You can't be in the city. The city is not going to be a good place for you and your families. That's one. Number two, you've got to be in a place where there's fresh water. That's absolutely necessary. And if there's fresh water there should be fish to eat, because the skies will be darkened and it will be difficult to grow plants. But fish can survive for a couple of years on algae and dark skies. That's important as well, too. And all of the other practical considerations apply after those two big ones. But this bunker mentality is not the way to go, because people need people. If you have an abscessed tooth, you're going to die. You need a dentist. And if you're not a dentist, you need one. People need each other. So the bunker mentality can last only so long. You're going to run out of ammo. You're going to run out of food. You have to be in a place that's sustainable. And that's what we call these sanctuary locations. A lot of my clients these days, and I don't really have time to do any more client work, but clients are interested in personal sanctuary locations. Those are important things. Fresh water and be out of the cities. You'll have notice. You'll see this is going to start slowly. The power grids will go down. You need to have a full tank of gas to get out of the cities, but you need to know where to go, and that's important. So as individuals, we can choose to participate or not.
So if I get you correctly, we should perhaps find some small city where there's a retreat area or something that is our place that we would go to, that is out of the major cities. As this event begins to unfold, it would be kind of our runaway place. Have I got that right?
Correct. Minimally correct. Or learn remote viewing and then turn your attention to your own sanctuary, and that'll give you specifics.
And what would be the advantage then, Major, of deciding that I wanted to learn to remote view today?
Well, for me, personally speaking, it was the idea that it changed my life. And I can know anything I want. There are some things beyond our ken, of course. Humans have a bicameral brain, and we process information. Our CPU, our central processing unit, handles a lot of stuff. And there's some patterns of information out there that are beyond our ken in terms of our software and our hardware, our biological software and hardware. But for me, knowing that I could know anything was pretty awing for me, and knowing that my lifespan is limited, and there are so many questions that I would have. It became paramount to me to address what are the most important questions in my life, because if you can know anything, what do you really want to know in the limited time span that you have as a corporate being? So that became very important to me, and I began to turn my attention to myself. What am I? What's man? Who am I? Well, in terms in what box am I? And or how many boxes are there that I exist in? Those kinds of things. And I began to study myself about 25 years ago, and I'm very happy with what I've discovered.
So if you know that you're basically sitting here and you might have a year before you're going to play with some end world scenarios, the advantage of maybe deciding to learn to remote view right now is the same advantage it be gained from just inner reflection, meditation. I mean, it is not that it's the same, but it leads us back to discovering who we are, why we're here. So instead of turning our energies maybe towards fear, we should turn them towards self-discovery, toward the really important issues again.
Well, for me, I think I did that. I've done that, and I'm very happy with the work. But there's still we have personalities that are different, and we need to attend to the things that make us happy. For me, because remote viewing is so precise and so technical, it was developed at its genesis as a military intelligence collection tool. Was a result of the CIA demanding something that could produce as much information, technical information, in as short a period of time as possible. For instance, where is the hydrogen leak on the space shuttle? Where is the air leak on Biosphere 2? Those kinds of things. So we have to describe things technically. What I did with this faculty, with these kind of things, is turn my attention to medical problems, not my own, but other people's. Why some of my students have been the world's leading doctors, and I've asked them to bring to my classes as a practicum their most intractable problems. Why did this person die? Or in case of a veterinarian, why was this dog paralyzed? These kinds of things, and turn these into projects where we solve them, where using a tool that no other tool can discern, because remote viewing is direct knowledge. So as a result of that, I've been able to save many lives, and by telling doctors, hey, here's where the problem is right here. This is in the spleen or this particular vertebrae or whatever. Or here's the psychological problem, because we can bypass all the hypnosis thing. It's direct knowledge. Hypnosis has to go through a series of gates to get to the knowledge. Why is this little girl have agoraphobia? Or why is she afraid of open spaces? Well, remote viewers in 45 minutes can tell you when this woman was a little girl, she was sitting on the park bench and she was terrorized by a dog. And you have
gone, Major, right where I wanted you to go. You see, the remote viewing tool, is an indispensable tool. If we're going to survive, and many of us are going to survive, it would become even more valuable.
Yes, where's the water?
In about 30 seconds, tell everybody again how to learn more about remote viewing from you, sir.
LearnRV.com.
LearnRV.com. It's a great site.
I will have a small, limited workshop, a basic workshop in Reno on November 3rd and 4th, and the information will be there soon about that workshop.
It's also on LearnRV.com. It's a great website. Go there now. Major, we appreciate you being with us and sharing the information. We're going to have to bring you back again. Maybe we'll bring you back in 2014.
Hopefully.
And we'll have a discussion about 2013. That would be my prayer. Sir, again, thank you. We've come to the end of another hour of Provocative Enlightenment, and I want to thank you all for joining us. I hope you enjoyed our show, and we'll join us again next week, same time, same place. Remember, knowledge is power. Knowing some of these things may not be what you want to know, but it may be what saves your life. All right, wherever you are in the world, remember, until next time, believing in yourself always matters.